TGS, Transform, Grow, Succeed. And this podcast is about your work as a caring professional and the wicked systemic issues that all of us are transforming into opportunities to achieve excellence in any environment. My name is Dr. Tim Gravoy, Executive Director of TGS Educational Consulting, and I'm excited to introduce Julie Shivananda, Director of Social Emotional Learning and Development, serving every single student in Tucson Unified School District here in Tucson, Arizona. Julie Shivananda began her career as a second grade and sixth grade teacher in Vail School District and came to Tucson Unified School District as a teacher mentor. Julie has also served as an academic and behavioral coach, school principal at Intermountain Academy for students with autism, and right now is the Director of Social and Emotional Learning and Development for Tucson Unified School District. Also, Julie loves cheesy dating shows. Love at First Sight and The Bachelor, of course, are classics, but Julie recommends that we all check out Farmer Wants a Wife. Julie says it's great. All right, Julie, did I get that right?
You got it perfect. Thanks. It's great to be here.
Excellent. And it absolutely is a pleasure. You know, we've been talking SEL for a number of years, and it just is a pleasure that, we've had a chance to work together so frequently lately. And I just thought that you just be amazing to talk about something that's very much in the minds of many of the folks that TGS Educational Consulting works with. And, actually, we went over the questions, but I forgot we're also going to ask you this. Can you tell me what social and emotional learning is?
Yes, absolutely. So social emotional learning at its core is really just focusing on the competencies needed to be successful and empathetic citizens in our global society. So focusing on competencies such as social awareness and understanding ourselves and how we feel and how we can work within our world and our community. So social awareness as a community, self-awareness and our feelings and how we work together, responsible decision-making. How do we think about all of the components in our lives and in our interactions? And then how do we make responsible decisions for our future, for others? And it's really just about teaching us how to be kind, empathetic humans, but also being able to disagree in a respectful manner if need be, and really just have a positive community and society.
The skills are teachable. They're teachable and they're learnable, and that really is a big part of what social and emotional learning is about. Well, thank you. And so I'd love for you to just tell us a bit about what it's like to be the Director of Social Emotional Learning and Development for a large school district. But instead of telling me just kind of what you do, I would love for you to tell me about who you serve and what you'd like to accomplish in this role.
So I am really blessed and proud to be able to serve mainly our teachers in Tucson Unified School District. They are the rock of our district, and they are who supports our students to be able to learn and grow in their academic communities. Mm-hmm. So it is my pleasure to be able to support mainly our teachers, but also our administrators from a district level on truly understanding the purpose of social emotional learning and giving them the tools and the tips needed to be able to grow in their professional growth and learning to be able to support their students, as well as a huge focus on adult SEL. What are we doing to ensure that our adults are feeling safe and connected in their workplace, feeling as though that they are being empowered to be able to support students in the way that they know that is best, to be able to be regulated adults, to be able to support students on a day-to-day basis.
And that's really amazing to hear, just that the adult component of that too. As we think about it, is if we're going to lead social and emotional learning in a classroom or in a school, whether we're a teacher or a school leader, we're going to have to be emotionally regulated ourselves to do that. We're going to have some skills, ourselves before we try to model that and teach it and expect others to do that, to do those effectively in our workplaces and in our classrooms as well. And so it's just really neat just to think about that also being a big goal of yours in this role. Well, thank you. I think that's really neat. Well, let's go ahead. Let's take a quick break. And when we come back, I'm curious to know just what you're working on right now. What is the big project that maybe you've been spending lots of time on this week? So we'll go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk about what Julie Shivananda, Director of Social Emotional Learning and Development in Tucson Unified School District, is working on right now. Youth on Their Own is a local nonprofit that supports the high school graduation and continued success of Pima County youth experiencing homelessness. Since its founding in 1986, Youth on Their Own has helped thousands of young people graduate from high school and pursue their dreams. If you'd like to get involved, consider donating to Yodo's Mini Mall. Starting now, Yodo will be collecting food, hygiene products, and school supplies to help homeless youth in our community. If you'd like to make a financial contribution, don't forget that all donations to Yodo are tax deductible, and if you live in Arizona, eligible for the Arizona Charitable Tax Credit. For more information, go to yoto.org or follow Yodo on Facebook or Instagram. Now, just this week, what's been the big thing that you're working on?
So one of the big components as we think about social emotional learning, and again, talking about supporting our teachers and our staff, one big component of our work currently is professional development for our educators. So we actually just yesterday had our district professional learning day, where we had more than 10 different sessions available throughout the day for our staff to learn more about things like co-regulation. How do we regulate ourselves to be able to be calm for our students and help them with their regulation? De-escalation strategies. So what are those extra tips and tricks to be able to utilize in your classroom to support your students when they might be hyper aware and have some big feelings? Talking about the purpose of social emotional learning, some classroom management strategies. One big thing that we're currently working on is we're super excited is also in June over summer professional development for teachers. We are currently hosting a social emotional learning symposium where we have a full day of learning. The fabulous Dr. Gravoy will be there, and he will be putting his social emotional learning hat on and giving some professional development for our teachers. But as we continue to survey and we talk to teachers about what do they need to feel comfortable and feel efficacious to be able to do this work, they need more information. They feel like they need to understand more trauma-informed practices. They are asking for the brain science of what does trauma do, and recognizing that we've all been through a trauma, with the school shutdowns and everything else that's happening, really being able to come together as a community and say, okay, this trauma happened. Let's understand how it potentially affected all of us as adults, as students, as a community. And then how do we understand how to move forward? How do we build positive classroom learning environments? What does that look like? And then so giving that support for the teachers to really understand how they can support their students. So a big focus this year has been not only figuring out our implementation plan for doing the work of SEL, but really focusing on our adults to truly understand and grow professionally in this new context and understanding what this kind of new group and new generation of kiddos needs. So we're really excited about those opportunities.
In addition to providing some amazing resources for teachers, there has been considerable amount of professional learning. I've been really privileged to be able to support some of that, and I'm very excited about the symposium. And if you are going to be at the symposium, my sessions all be about really classroom possible, social and emotional learning. And it really doesn't happen without, honestly, Julie, somebody like you organizing it all and making it happen and providing the resource and that time and space to learn. And it's and one of the things that I'm struck by and I'm hearing a lot of is really that idea of co-regulation.
Absolutely. And when we think about co-regulation and the need for that for our adults, a lot of times we hear words like teachers are heroes, they are selfless, they put themselves on the back burner, right? But what we're identifying is that we are leading to higher and higher and higher levels of burnout. So one of the big focus areas that we have for our teachers is helping them understand how to build their own emotional intelligence, how to think about how to keep themselves regulated, and recognizing that while you are heroes, it is not the expectation to be heroic. It is not the expectation that you walk in the door and don't have any feelings. But like you said, exactly, if we can model through that, our students will learn from that. And then when we have opportunities for regulating our students and ourselves, it brings things down, calming, really helps with our own individual stress levels, because teachers, they're going to go home to their families. And so they also need to be able to support in other areas of their lives. And so if we can support them in understanding how to keep themselves regulated and how to kind of manage that stress because let's face it, teaching is a very stressful job. There's a lot on the plate. There's a lot of things that you're focusing on. And so, yeah, and so it doesn't just help our students and model, it truly helps, the internal, or at least that's the hope, that's the goal.
Honestly, I like that language that yeah, you are heroes. You are absolutely heroes in the lives of children that absolutely need you and are growing in amazing ways because of all that you do. And trying to be heroic every single day is just not fair. But the beauty of co-regulation is, number one, co-regulation is really great for kids. And number two is like, no, we can actually attend to both at the same time. But I also want to get real with you for a bit. A lot of times teachers tell me that they've got tons of resources. They've got a box full of stuff, but they do not have a lot of time. And when it comes to implementing SEL effectively, what seems to be most important? Is it all the stuff that comes in the stuff that comes in the SEL box? Or is it the practices around what's in the SEL box?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And you're right. If I could wave a magic wand and give teachers all of the time to get everything done, I would be, a millionaire, right? So, but unfortunately, the reality is we don't have a lot of time. So honestly, the stuff, the packaged curriculum and the stuff, that is helpful. It's a helpful tool and resource, but it is not the end all be all when we're thinking about social emotional learning. And then also talking about feelings, it's a component of it, but it's not necessarily the whole piece of social emotional learning, right? It's one of that pieces. And that's where a lot of our adults sometimes get stuck, is I don't really understand how to talk about feelings. So when we think about social emotional learning and the practices, where I see the biggest bang for our buck is building those relationships. We are, as humans, we are social creatures. And whether we like it or not, we want to be accepted. We want approval from our peers and our colleagues and our friends. And so by building those relationships first, it gives students and teachers alike that opportunity to feel safe and connected in their environment. So their brains are going to be open for learning. So one of the biggest pieces to start with that I recommend for our teachers and staff is building those relationships. So standing at the door when your students are coming in and eye contact. Hey, how are you today? I'm really glad that you're here today. Quick story that I like to share. Tim, presenting in front of a group and audience can be a little nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
Especially in front of, certain groups of people. Administrators, they're the ones that kind of give me those nerves when I present to. And so last summer, I was doing a presentation to administrators and I was nervous and I'm rechecking my notes and, feeling all the things on the way. And I get there and one of our assistant superintendents was standing at the door. He greeted me and said, "Hey, Julie, I'm so glad you're here." And that actually, honestly, I had a physical response. It actually calmed me down. At least one person, whether he was being truthful or not, was glad that I was here or that I was there, and that it actually just calmed my nerves. So if we can build that in for ourselves and for our students, just knowing that there's an adult or there's a person here that sees me, that wants to build that connection, I'm going to come in. It's not going to be perfect. You're not necessarily going to see a huge change in behaviors of students. But as you continue to do that, you continue to show up and build those relationships. And then looking for those quick opportunities within your classroom. So maybe rethinking your bell work. Instead of just posting a couple of practice algebra questions on the board, having more of a question around, here's a problem. How might you solve it? How might you explain it to someone else? And then having those opportunities for students to work together at the beginning of bell work and say, "Hey, I don't get this. Do you get this? Help me through that. What are you thinking?" And so the more the opportunities that we can build for our students to connect, and even as you're doing the work, you're doing the algebra, you're teaching second graders to read, having just a 30-second conversation at the end of that and say, "How did that feel? Was there anything that you were struggling with? Is there something that someone said that made a little bit more sense to you?" That is social emotional learning in and of itself. That's teaching our students how to connect. And that's a lot of what I hear from educators right now, is coming back from the pandemic. our students are struggling with understanding how to connect with one another, how to have conversations with one another without getting, offended, without getting super angry, learning how to disagree in a respectful manner. So really focusing on those opportunities for building relationships and building connections. And it's easy to interweave it into what we already do. And then if you have an extra 10 minutes, even once a week, and you're going to pull out that curriculum and start talking about what is empathy, how do we show empathy, what is responsible decision making, that's just icing on the cake. But it really comes down to those practical strategies and essential practices that we do anyway. Just focusing more strategically on that is going to really give us that biggest bang for our buck, and it's a great starting point.
So I love that idea of like just ice the box, the box of the SEL stuff in it, the lessons and the games and the stuff that comes with it, are often really good, but they're icing. They're icing. Like the cake is relationships. Another colleague once said this to me a different way. They said when it comes to social emotional learning, it's really all about relationships. Everything else is just a box. Everything else is just a box.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's this phenomenon or philosophy of the law of the lid that we talk a lot about in our professional development. And so if you don't feel it and you're not excited about it, your students are not either. So what you project is what they're going to pick up on. So if you are like, yes, I really want to focus on relationships, I don't have time for that stuff in the box, I don't understand the stuff in the box, you're not going to be as effective with it anyway. So, one of the things that we're trying to really focus on is not harp on, social emotional learning. We have an adopted curriculum in the district. This is an expectation that we're going to do something and focus on SEL, but it's counterintuitive if I say, hey, teacher, you have this curriculum, you have to do it. And then the teacher says, all right, it's time for SEL, we have to do this. And the students are going to be like, what? I don't want to do that if the teacher doesn't want to do it either. So really giving us time. And that's why we're focusing on professional development first, supporting our teachers and truly understanding what's in the box and the purpose and the why, but also focusing on what you're already doing, the fact that you're showing up every day, the fact that you are trying to make that connection with the kid that's sitting in the back with the hoodie on all the time. You're not going to necessarily see the fruits of your labor right away, but just know that you are chipping away, it's supporting those kiddos with building those connections and those relationships.
So let me ask maybe a spicy question then, because I agree with you 100% that it's a person, not a box, that's going to affect social emotional learning. That's going to lead the kinds of skills and teach the kinds of content that you need to know to be a successful learner and a good human being. So then why do we bother with a box?
Well, that's a really great question. I think at the core, starting with those practices, that's kind of that baseline. And if you think of MTSS or PBIS, and you have that pyramid, tier 1 is the relational piece, where we're going to probably be able to support the majority of our students just in that modeling piece. Where the box comes in is to really support those tier 2 and those tier 3 students. So we have those students in our classrooms so I can say, being the principal of a school for autism, being a mom of a son who is on the spectrum with autism, his brain doesn't work in that way. His executive functioning, he has some deficits there, and he does actually need that explicit opportunity to learn how to have a conversation with an adult, how to have a conversation with a peer. And so we have some of those students in our classrooms that need that explicit focus on how do we talk to one another? How do we show empathy? What does empathy even mean? What does it look like? So some of our students, my kiddo, he inherently doesn't have empathy because of his autism. So teaching him those skills to learn empathy and understand how to be empathetic towards his classmates and his teachers and society is really imperative for some of those students. So it really needs to be a mix of but the practices really need to come first. It's that tier one, that universal level to start the playing field. Similarly with any of our other content, right? We inherently, a lot of our students, they can get what they need, to learn on YouTube. And now there's ChatGPT. I just saw a TikTok the other day that, students are now using ChatGPT to write their essays, and then they're turning them in.
Mhm.
So we have these other tools, things, and other opportunities for students to get some of the content that they need. But we also need to explicitly teach how to solve quadratic equations, right? We also need to explicitly teach what's happening in our universe and learning about government functions and how to be a citizen. So it's really kind of that tiered approach. But the explicit piece is not always inherent. We all oftentimes think, oh, I have the 16-year-old high school, he's almost an adult, he should know how to behave, he should know how to talk to one another. But if we hadn't preemptively done that work and done that explicit work on how to make good decision, how to have good decision making, how to actually look and evaluate the different components and what's happening around you to make that positive decision, if we don't explicitly teach those competencies, our students are going to suffer.
Yes, the practices really do have to be first, because if we don't have those practices of doing relational things, of being basically a good human being and modeling that ourselves, and modeling how we manage big feelings as adults who are leading learning in the classroom, it's just the box is pointless. There's nothing in that box that our students will believe, because we can't even model what the box is even going to try and say we need to be doing.
Absolutely. And I do think that there's core lessons that would be great for the tier one students. But you're going to have some of those students that, are really already just inherently good at having those conversations and good at understanding. And so then they can also be potentially maybe a positive peer that can support another student that maybe needs a little bit of that extra support. But yeah, it's honestly tailored to the needs of your student, the needs of your classroom, the needs of your school. So really focusing on what is our climate and culture? Do our students feel safe? If they don't feel safe and connected, you're not going to be able to teach them algebra. You're not going to be able to teach them to have high level, responsible decision-making skills. You're not going to be able to have democratic seminars and have that opportunity to have those conversations. So it's really, looking at the needs where you're at and then using the tools to the best of your ability to meet the needs of your students.
Well, if I'm a classroom teacher who's just been hired this week, and all of a sudden the social emotional learning box arrives along with all the other curriculum I know I'm responsible to teach, I feel a whole lot better. That what I can start with is developing those practices of connection, those practices of relationship, those practices around co-regulation. And then as I implement those practices, I'm going to learn more about what co-regulation is. And then when I am ready, then I can start pulling out the co-regulation lesson. Julie, I'd love for you to just share a final thought.
There's a lot of components, right, to social emotional learning, and it can feel very overwhelming at times. So one of the best ways to get started is really building community, building those connections. So as a school leader, really focusing on identifying your climate and culture, and then identifying where you want to move forward. Do all of your teachers feel connected to their community? Does your community come together on a regular basis? Are you visible and present around your community, making those connections? Do your teachers feel comfortable and safe coming to you when needed? Are there structures in place where teachers have the opportunity to collaborate with like-minded individuals and have those conversations around, hey, this is happening, it's maybe not going so well, what are your strategies and your thoughts? So really starting on building your community, building those connections, and it's really down to relationships.
If you had 5 minutes, and in fact, you probably only do have 5 minutes right now, what are you going to do to make sure that kids are connected? The other thing that I'm hearing you say too is that I'm kind of reminded by sometimes we sort of take for granted that because we spend time with each other all year long, that we are connected. And what's sounding like is that, yes, it doesn't have to be super duper hard, but it has to happen. And it's got to be intentional, that we have to say, yes, we are going to take time and space to have these conversations, because otherwise, how on earth am I ever going to find out who likes mustard and who likes ketchup? Like, we're going to have to do it, right? I mean, am I paraphrasing correctly?
No, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It does not have to be time intensive. It just needs to be intentional.
Mhm.
And the connections and the relationships are going to be what powers through, especially as the year goes on. If you think about this at the beginning of the year, but at
Mhm.
any points in the year, we're going to go through a lot. There's a lot of stress, there's state testing, there's a lot of things happening. Our young ones have other stressors in their lives, our adults have stressors in their lives. And if we can come and intentionally be connected and know at least just something a little bit about someone else, we know that we're all in the same boat.
Julie, thank you so much for being here today. And just thank you for sharing some amazing insights into social and emotional learning. I'm really excited to see this work as you support teachers and school leaders here in Tucson Unified School District. And I hope just everyone who's watching, just that you reach out to me or to Julie with your thoughts on our conversation. You can reach Julie at julie.shivananda@tusd1.org. I'll make sure that's all spelled out in the just in the description. And you can find me at www.tgseducationalconsulting.com. Until next time, everyone, may you have as many opportunities to be as generous and good to yourself as you are with those you serve.